When we were kids, growing up, we always looked forward to Halloween. We didn't know anything about how it began or what the meanings were behind it. All we knew was that we could get dressed up funny and go around through the neighborhood and people would give us free candy. All right. The information you are about to hear on A View from Space on AM 640 tonight is to help you understand the seriousness of this so-called holiday, Halloween. It's not to spoil your fun, but to ask the question, should we join a festival whose history and practices are for the dead? And I realize that you may not realize that we are living in a culture of death. We do not celebrate life, we celebrate death. Our entertainment is all centered around death or fear of it. Fear of death is a controller. Want proof? Check the lineups at the H1N1 vaccine places where they're giving them out. If you tune into the mainstream media, the mass media, you will only hear one side of the story with that fear, and that is that the vaccine is going to save you. You will not hear anyone coming on the mainstream media news saying, I'm not going to take that shot. I won't get it. But millions are actually not going to get it. I hope you caught my H1N1 show 3 weeks ago, because on that show I told you exactly what was going to happen, and it's happening. So tonight, with Halloween being a billion-dollar business, second only to Christmas in retailing, very few understand the true nature and historic foundations of this occultic celebration. The word Halloween actually originates with the Catholic Church. It comes from the words All Hallows Eve, All Hallows Day, or All Saints' Day. This day was set aside to honor saints, the dead saints. The holiday was founded to try and divert attention away from the pagan practices taking place on the 31st of October. Some believe Irish immigrants fleeing the potato famine may have brought the origins to North America in the 1840s. In occult and witchcraft circles, October 31 represents a day of worship. That's right, a day of worship, not fun and eating candy. The actual holiday is not called Halloween at all. It is called Samhain. This is the Celtic New Year. The Druids' New Year's Day is tomorrow, so Happy New Year. Is the real origin of this holiday called Halloween. History will tell you that the Celtic people were worshippers of earth gods, woodland spirits, and sun deities, just like our leaders are today. And the new one-world global governmental system that's coming. One legend explains the Samhain spirits of all those who had died throughout the year would come back in search of living bodies to possess for the next year. It was believed to be their only hope for entering the afterlife. It was also the day that the living were to communicate with the dead. This is called necromancy, talking to the dead, foretelling the future This is the night that the veil between the spirit world and the material world, the physical world which we are living in, is the thinnest. And it is a time when you can go across that veil into the spirit world, and the spirit world can come into our world, the physical. Symbols of Halloween. There are three possible origins for the moniker of Halloween: trick or treat. In the early practice of Halloween, people were afraid of spirits doing harm to their homes, so they would leave treats outside their homes to keep them happy. The Europeans tried to Christianize this pagan ritual by calling it souling. They would go out and collect soul cakes. The more cakes you would receive, the more prayers you would send up to your dead relatives. In celebration of the recently completed harvest, Celts would give offerings to the food of the gods. They would go from door to door to collect food to donate to their deities. And history points out that on Halloween the Celts would terrorize the people and the countryside, butcher cattle, and take it as a spoil to please their gods. Happy Halloween. This ghoulish festival, the favorite of children, is rooted in paganism. Why is it the favorite of children? The simple candy factor. On October 31st, spooky beings and superheroes, cartoon characters and rubberized celebrities line the streets, anticipating those sugary rewards, or going to costume parties to impress their fellow revelers of how unique and cool their costumes are. Compelled by shouts of trick or treat, children of all ages will again tote huge bags with which they would fill to the brim if they could, resulting in the night's hunt. It's called Halloween. And while for most of it seems like a harmless annual activity, its roots run deep in ancient paganism and witchcraft. All Hallows Eve, or Halloween, originated in the 7th century. It was celebrated on May 13th originally, and was a night for remembering deceased saints and martyrs. The Catholic Church inaugurated. It was the date that was later changed to November 1st, and you will find, if you look on your calendar, the day after October 31st, November 1, is All Saints' Day, renamed to hide the pagan holiday of Samhain. They tried to Christianize the pagan holiday. They do it to them all. Beltane, the summer festival, May 1st, also. May Day, it's also covered over. It's actually Beltane. The festivals of summer, winter, fire, and the powers of darkness are celebrated. All over Europe, Halloween, the night that marks the transition from fall to winter, was the time of year when the souls of the dead were supposed to revisit their old homes in order to warm themselves by the fire. These ghosts walked the countryside, eating the offerings of food and drink, the treat supplied by living family members. Darker forces roamed the night as well. Demons, hobgoblins, witches on broomsticks, they all haunted the night with acts of mischief. The trick. Real witches were also known to celebrate on Halloween night. The witches of Aberdeen danced around an old grey stone in the foot of the hill at Craiglich, the devil himself playing music in front of them. Modern witches and Wiccans practice similar sky-clad Halloween traditions, nude, calling on earth spirits and goddesses to visit their knife-drawn circles of power. The goddess Hecate The Titan Earth Mother of the wizards and witches, illustrates best the connection between Wicca and the Celtic Halloween traditions of the Druids in the realm supernatural evil. As the dark goddess of witchcraft, Hecate, like Isis, was worshipped with impure rites and magical incantations. Her name was taken from the ancient Egyptian word Heka, sorcery or magical, which may explain the association of the Egyptian frog goddess of the same name. Frogs are symbols of evil spirits. And wouldn't you know it, our system has taken that frog and put it in millions and millions of children's heads. Kermit the Frog! He was used to endear those frogs to an entire generation of people who grew up watching Sesame Street. Spaceman, back with more in just a moment. Halloween night on AM 640.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640. He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But you can take it. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
The guy that calls Space. You can email me, space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. I was just speaking about Hecate, the one who was worshipped as the goddess of witchcraft with impure rites and magical incantations. Her name was taken from the ancient Egyptian word Heka, meaning sorcery or magical. She's also the Egyptian frog goddess. And I mentioned Kermit just before the break. It also explains the affiliation of frogs with witchcraft and the different potions of frogwort and Hecate's hallucinogenic plant, also called aconite, which supposedly sprouted from the saliva of Cerberus's mouth that fell to the ground when Hercules forced him to the surface of the earth. Of course, Cerberus in the occult world is the three-headed dog that guards the gates of Hades. In your world, they've kept Cerberus in front of you as the 51% owner of GMAC, General Motors' financial arm, and also involved with the merger talks with Chrysler. Cerberus, capital investment firm. There are people keeping all of this alive, and you are keeping this holiday, this celebration of the dead, alive when you participate in Halloween. All under the guise of fun. Because it's always for your own good with the Illuminati. Because Hecate's followers practiced their magic wherever three paths joined, Hecate was known by the Romans as Trivia, tri, or three, and via, roads. Tri means three, via, roads, trivia. That's how the Romans knew Hecate. Later, when the church leaders compared the magic of the goddess Trivia with God's power, they found it to be inferior, so the pursuit of Hecate's knowledge became known as a trivial pursuit. That is also put in front of us and kept alive by the board game Trivial Pursuit. Trivial Pursuit was a useless direction to learning. But the fact that Hecate's followers sincerely believed in and feared her magic and her presence. She was legendary. Hecate was said to have the ability to inflict the mind with madness. She had the influence over night creatures. She also was thought to govern haunted places where evil or murderous acts occurred. These areas where violence or lechery had a history that were believed to be magnets of evil spirits, something like haunted houses that you probably have visited at least once in your lifetime. And if you wanted to get along with the resident apparitions or ghosts, you needed to make a sacrificial offering to Hecate, the ruler of the darkness. Hecate's representative, which was the night owl, announced the acceptance of the offering, and those who gathered on the eve of the full moon perceived the spooky sound of the owl as a good omen. As a matter of fact, statues of the goddess, made up of the triple face of a dog, a snake, and a horse, watched over the dark rituals when they were performed at the crossing of 3 roads. At midnight, Hecate's devotees left food offerings at the intersection for the goddess's supper, and left in a hurry, without turning around or looking back. Sometimes the offerings consisted of honey cakes and chicken hearts, other times puppies, honey. Female black lambs were slaughtered for the goddess also, and her strigae. The strigae were deformed and vicious owl-like creatures of Hecate's that flew through the night, feeding off the bodies of the unattended babies. I kid you not, this is a tradition, an ancient tradition of belief in Europe. During the day, the strigae appeared as simple old women, which accounts for the history of flying witches on broomsticks. They were the strigae. The same strigae hid in the leaves of the trees during the annual festival of Hecate, originally on August 13th, when Hecate's followers offered up the highest praise of the goddess. August 13th? Ring a bell? It was the opening day of the 2004 Olympiad in Turin, Italy, with Hecate featured prominently in the opening ceremonies if you watched. Hecate's devotees celebrated festivals near Lake Averna in Campania, where the sacred willow groves of the goddess stood, and they communed with the tree spirits, which were the earth spirits, including Hecate. They were thought to inhabit trees and summoned the souls of the dead from the mouths of nearby caves. It was here that Hecate was known as Hecate Pluthonia, Hecate of the earth. In other words, she most clearly embodied the popular Earth Mother spirit that communicated with her through the cave stones and sacred willow trees. The Druids also believe that spirits are in the trees, and it is also the belief of the Illuminati that are running the Green program. Yes, don't kill the trees. They contain spirits, the earth spirits. You are not as important as the trees to the Druids. You are not as important to the Illuminati as the trees, because the Green movement is ahead of the human being in their mind. You are not as important. And if one has to go, it's the human being. Space, back with more in a moment on AM 640 and a view from space.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640. He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But you can take it. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
The Spaceman, AM 640. Like to email, space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. BH in British Columbia writes, hey, Space, in line with all you're talking about tonight, something else they seem determined to keep in our mind daily is the paranormal, as there seems to be a slew of paranormal research shows on television these days, along with, of course, the big hit movie Paranormal Activity, centering around a couple that provoked a demon just a little too much for their own good. Your thoughts? Signed BH in Victoria, BC. This Paranormal Activity proves to you that demons cannot be controlled. Ever. It also tells you one other thing. That this is the new religion. That's why it's all over your television, all over the movie theaters, so heavily saturated in our psyche. Because there is a shift coming to the new religion, the Luciferian religion. I've talked about many times on A View from Space on AM 640. Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, was also known as Hecate Propylia, the one before the gate, is the meaning. A role where she guarded the entrances of homes and temples from the outside evils. You talk about Satan casting out Satan. She was also known as Hecate Propolis, meaning the one who leads, as in the underworld guide of Persephone, if you know that story, and of those who inhabit graveyards. And she was also known as Hecate Phosphorus, the light bearer, her most sacred title, and the one that recalls the most powerful underworld spirit, Satan, whose original name was Lucifer, the light bearer. It was her role as the feminist earth goddess spirit Hecate Clothonia that gave her the perception as being God. Hecate Phosphoros. Yes, that's exactly where we get the chemical name for phosphorus from, that burns with a bright light. It's on the tips of matchsticks. Have you ever lit a match and got a little piece of phosphorus tucked to your skin, and how it burns, and it will not be extinguished? They make bombs from this stuff. Can you imagine being hit with a phosphorus bomb? I know it's ridiculous to say that in war weapons are outlawed, but phosphorus bombs are actually outlawed in war, although they were used recently in Gaza. The connection between ancient paganism and the modern customs and costumes of Halloween is easy to trace, too. The Hecatian myths adopted Celtic occultists all through the pop culture and symbolism of today. Just as in the days of Hecate, the ritual goes on today. People visiting neighborhood homes on Halloween night represent the dead in search of food. That's the treat. Masks of devils and hobgoblins represent evil spirits seeking mischief. The trick. Those who pass out candy represent the homes visited by the dead, or may also represent worried individuals seeking to appease Hecate and other nighttime terrors. Here's a few. Many half-truths are being propagated to hide the real, grotesque, horrible truth of the origin of the jack-o'-lantern. One of them is what's also called the will-o'-the-wisp, foxfire, the fairy fire, jack-o'-lantern. According to some historians, a wandering soul struck between heaven and hell, Others claim the Druids left jack-o'-lanterns on doorsteps to ward off evil spirits. This is only partially true. Another legend concerns a drunk named Jack who made a deal with the devil. Each claims to be the origin of the real jack-o'-lantern myth. But it's not, and they are not. One is close, claiming that the Druids left jack-o'-lanterns on doorsteps, but not to ward off evil spirits. Keep it on AM 640 and A View from Space, and the true story will soon be told on tonight's show of the origin of the jack-o'-lantern that is on so many people's steps this evening, worldwide. Of course, most children don't wear masks and go out after candy. They don't understand or even care about the symbolism. As a parent, don't you think it's your responsibility to tell them? Or are you so in denial of the ancient connection to Halloween that you'll even lie to your own children, and in doing so condemn them to continue repeating this horrible ritual born in hell called Halloween? Masks and their meaning. I'll tell you about it in a moment. To contrast the pagan celebrations, the Western Christians celebrated All Saints and All Souls during the day with liturgies. On All Souls, a penitential sorrow for doing wrong, liturgy was offered asking God's mercy on those souls. Dark clothing, black, brown, or purple, were worn by priests. The candles used in penitential services were of unbleached beeswax, and therefore orange in color. The Druids borrowed these colors for their own. Black and orange. The black? Well, black represents knowledge in the occult. That's why priests wear black. The orange? Unbleached beeswax is where the orange comes from. Now you know the origin of black and orange as the colors of Halloween, brought to you by the Druids. As a matter of fact, to make Halloween all-inclusive to all nationalities and cultures, this little place of the world that I'm living in here, in Ontario, Canada, the school system has deemed it's not a Halloween celebration in the school system now. It is known as Orange and Black Day. And look where the origin of the two colors come. The Druids. A very powerful sect and a part of the Illuminati's order in their structure. The existence of satanic cults and their activities are no secret to people who listen to this show. Most satanic groups are anti-Christian rather than pagan. Since Halloween is a pre-Christian celebration, Christ is not the focus, so Satanists can celebrate their alternative religion. And that's exactly what the Illuminati want when they named it Orange and Black Day in this particular area of the world where I'm living. The growing interest and belief in occult powers we just talked about with the paranormal activity movies and all of the programming on television. And you'll notice I never call A View from Space a program, because I'm not programming anyone. They are programming you. I try to show how they program you, and that's why I call it the show. For one night, obnoxious, mean-spirited behavior is in vogue with this celebration of Halloween, with the emphasis on dark powers and death in this death culture. So it's interesting to know that in a poll, a youth survey found that nearly 1 in 3 teens believes in the power of witchcraft, and 1 in 5 actually believes in ghosts. Also, almost all teenagers surveyed believe in some supernatural phenomena. Believe me, the people that have taken in that paranormal show in the theaters are going to be walking out going, God, that was real. That was just so real. And by the way, a little tip on that movie, if you've seen it or are going to see it, and I do not recommend it, the camera is you. That's who you are. You are always watching through the eyes of the camera. You are the camera. So you are a witness to all of this paranormal evil activity. And you're opening your mind to accepting it as truth. You're accepting the lie. Spaceman back with more in just a moment on AM 640. It's just a view from space. Don't panic.
You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the rights to free speech while he still can, on AM 640.
I'm the guy that calls space. You'd like to email me? I have a couple of addresses. Spaceman at 640toronto.com is one, and space at 640toronto.com is the other. DB from Hamilton, Ontario writes, Space, I had my young cousins visiting today, and I noticed they were watching the so-called Family Channel, which is nothing more than Disney propaganda when they were showing a sequel of movies called Halloween Town. It involves a family of witches, or Wiccans, mostly women, with a young boy that uses their so-called white magic to fight off black magic created by warlocks and travel to a magical town populated by so-called friendly monsters. They had reference to conjuring up demons as it was a good thing. A man who really was a frog, the symbol of the pyramid, the eye inside, strategically placed in the movie on a taxicab driven by a skeleton, as a matter of fact. This movie is obviously the Illuminati trying to promote their religion on the very young. And not only that, DB in Hamilton, Ontario, but also impressing the symbols into their subconscious, which is really why they go after the children, to start them young, get them used to the symbolism, never knowing what it means, but being comfortable and have always been around it, familiar with it, which makes them more acceptable to believe it. It can be devastating to the soul. Let me point out something about masks. I told you a moment ago or so, a few minutes ago, about the meaning of the mask. There are spiritual ramifications to mask wearing that actually have far-reaching consequences, which, by the way, are always used in satanic rituals today. Masks. You see, you are left vulnerable to the spirits connected with masks. You are asking the demonic spirits. Well, that's not totally correct. You are inviting demonic spirits to be part of you. Since masks allow you to be anonymous, You can do things that you would not normally do. Just like Halloween with the women. They love Halloween because they can wear provocative things that they would normally be called a slut for. But on Halloween, it's cool. And they can act out their fantasy. Or possession by that spirit that wants them to dress that particular way. And how did that get into their minds? When they were young, they saw it and went, I think that's cool. I'd like to dress up like that. Planting the seeds in people's minds. So, when you put on a mask, you are inviting the demonic spirits to be part of you, since masks allow you to be anonymous. You're putting on another persona. In short, you are being possessed. You are supposed to keep your own identity. If you put that truth into a social context, say if nobody wore masks at all, are these so-called terrorists on television with the videos with the masks on, with wraps around their faces? Well, they couldn't do it. They would be instantly recognized. How about bank robbers? They could no longer do it. Their identity would be instantly known. The day before Samhain, Halloween, it's the last day of summer, or the old year. The day after Samhain is the first day of winter, or the new year. Being between seasons or years, Samhain was and is considered a very magical time when the dead walk among the living and the veil between past, present, and future may be lifted in prophecy and divination. There is some evidence to indicate that 3 days were spent celebrating this festival. Philip Carr-Gom, chosen chief of the Order of the Bards, Ovates, and Druids, speaking of both Paleo-pagan and Meso-pagan Druids in England, had this to say about his elements of the Druid tradition. Samhain from 31st of October to November 2nd was a time of no time. Celtic society, like all early societies, was highly structured and organized. Everyone knew their place. Time stopped. And what are we doing tonight? Stopping time. Not only stopping time, but reversing time, as the Druids strike again with their magical spell called Daylight Saving Time, reverting back to Standard Time tonight. So at 2 a.m., the Druids will still today, October 31st, 2009, will stop time as they always have done and believed and move it back 1 hour. And the little catchphrase, so that you will be deceived on what the real truth behind this is. What's going back to Standard Time from Daylight Saving Time? I'm giving you an extra hour in the summertime for sunshine. Right. One more time. From Philip Carr-Gom, chosen chief of the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. Samhain from October 31st to November 2nd is a time of no time. Time stops. See, the early society, when the Druids ruled openly, was highly structured and organized. Everyone knew their place. But to allow that order to be psychologically comfortable, the Celts knew that there had to be a time when order and structure were abolished, wiped out, when chaos could reign. And so when is that time? Time abolished for 3 days. In the ancient days were the Druids of this festival, and people did crazy things. Men dressed as women, women as men. I saw one tonight on the subway. It's still happening! It's still being honored. Get it? And you're doing it. If you're dressed up as a Halloween costume, or participating in this holiday. This happened at Beltane, too, May 1st, May Day. It's not really May Day or a laborer's holiday or the 1st of May of whatever your May Day celebrations is. It's Beltane. It's a high witching holiday. Farmers' gates were unhinged, left in ditches. People's horses were moved to different fields. Tricks were played. But behind this apparent lunacy lie a deeper meaning. The Druids knew that these 3 days had a special quality about them. The veil, as I said, between this world and the world of the spirits was drawn aside on these nights, and for those who were prepared, journeys could be made safely to the other side. So the Druids' rites were concerned with making contact with the spirits of the departed, who were seen as sources of guidance and inspiration rather than as sources of dread. The dark moon, the time when no moon can be seen in the sky, was the face of the moon which ruled this time, because it represents a time in which our mortal sight needs to be obscured in order for us to see into the other worlds. The dead are honored and feasted, not as the dead, but as the living dead, spirits of loved ones and of guardians who hold the root wisdom of the tribe. The Christian church was unable to get the people to stop celebrating this holiday, so they simply sprinkled a little holy water on it and gave it a new name. And we're still doing the rituals. Space back with more in a moment on AM 640. View from space.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640. The ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded, and he goes deeper than a black hole into today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
Well, we got a call Space. You'd like to email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. I thank so much for the emails I've already received. And I would also like to mention that I'm getting from both sides. I'm getting it from the occultists who actually believe that these ancient religions of paganism are more wonderful than any other religion and are the truth. Well, I'm one of those people that lifts up mankind, that wants to help mankind. I don't want to destroy mankind. And I don't believe the occultists for one moment want to lift anyone up but themselves and their gods and goddesses. When you get into human sacrifice, even if the people are going, pick me, pick me, pick me, I want to die, I want to die, I still don't go for that, okay? Human sacrifice, or even animal sacrifice, to me, is wrong. Worshipping the earth is wrong. People before the earth. Okay? People before the earth. I would rather have people being fed than having a grove of trees grow naturally. Those who practice witchcraft and sorcery are experts at mixing herbs to make medicines and poisons. Guess what? I think the medical community is right in there with this. They could curse someone by obtaining a lock of hair, fingernail clippings, clothing, or personal items. Witches and other occult groups have 8 major festivals during the year. This is the wheel of the year. This includes the 4 solstices at the changing of the seasons, as well as October 31st or Halloween Samhain. While most witches don't do sacrifices, human anyway, the other forms of satanic worship do. As the witches desire more power, they will find out how to get it. It will require sacrificing of cats and small animals, and then eventually human beings, to appease their gods. Just have a look at the number of missing children who disappeared 2 to 3 weeks before solstice, or Samhain. We have one here in Toronto. It's not talked about at all. A missing 14-year-old boy. I have never heard. I'm working in the media. I have not heard of it. Missing since last Friday, a week ago, yesterday. Last year, we had the little girl that disappeared, was snatched a few weeks before. So don't you go emailing me about your pagan religion and how you love it. And I can't even pronounce your goddesses' names. Many police and federal agencies even have ritual abuse task forces. You never hear about them, but they exist. They operate because the Satanists and the pagans are trying to enact their religions without penalty. They're not discussed, they're not acknowledged, but they do exist. Ritual abuse task forces. Samhain is the most important of the fire festivals. Fire represents the sun. They are sun worshippers because it marks the Celtic New Year. The day itself is a time for paying homage to the sun god Baal, who had given the ripened grain for safe storage. The Celts' Indo-European cousins in India celebrate the same ritual called Diwali. It's their New Year's festival that honors the safe return from the sun. The Druids thought that when the sun died, or was captured at the end of October, the powers of darkness took over. They mourned the death of the sun, since they had little knowledge of astronomy or physical sciences, nor the progression of the equinoxes and seasons, no understanding there, and thought that for the next 6 months their sun god Baal was busy fighting enemies who were in cahoots with the Lord of Darkness, Samhain. According to the ancient myths, Samhain was the time of year when remote tribal peoples of antiquity paid tribute to their conquerors, and divinatory time when the Cid might reveal to them the magnificent, glorious palaces of the gods of the underworld. Also, Samhain was considered to be a time of dark prognostic omens and dark couplings, a time when malignant birds emerged from the caves of Grogum to prey on mankind, led by monstrous three-headed vultures whose foul breath withered the autumn-harvested crops. Mythical kings and fallen heroes were said to have died on Samhain, while carousing Ulster warriors known as the Iliad had met their imminent death by fire and sword at the hands of their Munster enemies on the battlefield. For the Druids, the year ended October 31. That was their time when all of nature seemed to be dying out. Leaves withered, fell to the ground. Plants drooped. Farms yielded crops no more. Samhain was the original festival that came to be christened All Saints' Day in medieval Europe. This is now November 1st in the current Christian calendar. Samhain is one of 3 solar festivals marked by sacred fires and sacrificial blazing rituals. The 1st of May for sowing, human sacrifice required. 21st of June for ripening at the turn of the year, human sacrifice required. The Vespers of Eve on the 1st of November for harvesting, Samhain, human sacrifice required by the gods. During the last of these festivals, the Druids, dressed in white robes, gathered around the cairns of the local hilltops where a sacred bonfire burned eternally throughout their entire calendar year. A sacred bonfire burning eternally throughout the entire year, in symbolic homage to the emblem of the sun. During the height of the Druids, the priestly caste of Celtic society, all fires except those of the Druids were extinguished on Samhain, October 31st. In other words, every single fireplace in every single house was extinguished by law, because they go by the rule of law, and just like today, they use the rule of law. Householders were given a fine or a tax for the holy fire which burned at their altars. Even now, in countries populated by a Celtic stock or lineage such as Brittany, Ireland, Wales, Gaelic Scotland, or in certain even rural English counties, permeated in the past by certain Celtic influences, we still see survival of old traditions and customs like bonfires associated with the seasons of the Holy Souls. In Ireland, a certain custom has come to be known as Samhain or La Samhain, for the Feast of the Sun. Where the black cat origin come from? Black cats at Halloween. To the Druids, cats became sacred. In time, black cats came to be associated with Halloween. They were thought to have carried magical powers that humans did not possess. Cats were often thought to be witches' helpers, or were feared as being the reincarnated souls of evil persons who had lived once before. They were sacred in the ancient Egyptian mystery religion, cats. The Druids' New Year, Samhain, is the beginning of the winter half of the year. The seasons of Gimret and Erech is known as the days between the years, similar in function to Janus, the ancient Roman deity of doorways, who could look both backwards at the old year and forwards to the new one. It's the two-headed man. And wouldn't you know it, it's in front of us still today, cleverly disguised as an investment firm. Janus, the investment firm, on Wall Street. I kid you not, all of their symbols are still alive today, bolstered by the elite rich to keep pushing their religion, which is sun worshipping and earth goddess worshipping. People, they're the vampires, and they suck your blood to keep in the high ivory towers where they live. And they prey upon you and I daily and nightly. And we celebrate their festival? Give your head a shake. It's Space on A View from Space on AM 640
deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with a view from space on AM 640.
And we got a called Space on AM 640. This is a view from space. Like to email me, space@640toronto.com is one address, and spaceman@640toronto.com is the other. Two of them to handle the traffic. PG writes, "Hi, Space. It almost seems like you have been touched by the hand of the Illuminati by not spending a few minutes on swine flu. If they have asked you not to comment on swine flu, I understand. We all have to do what we do to survive." Well, PG, let me just say this. I've done 3 hours on H1N1. That's 3 hours, and told it like it was. And as a matter of fact, when the Illuminati mass-controlled media jumps on something, I'm way past it. I'm finished with it. I'm over it. I've done it already. I do it before it happens, sir. And I told you exactly what would happen, and it's happening. That they would blow it up to an enormous level. And I explained the reasons for it. And I also explained how the flu kills. I even traced it back to the 1918 Spanish flu and the strain therein. I revealed many, many, many truths on that show. 3 weeks ago, I did an entire show on H1N1, the swine flu. I went deep into Margaret Chan and how she got to where she was and revealed who she really is. Sir, no one has ever told me what to say and what not to say. When that day arrives, I walk. It's not called The View Space was given to say. It's called A View from Space. I'm that guy. Of all of the things that I have revealed and that I have brought up on this show, how could anyone ever say I was being manipulated? It's absurd. Simply because of the things that come out of my mouth. I am totally unbridled. I say what I think and I believe what I say. Oh, and by the way, PG, the entire show on H1N1 was riveting. It's all over the net. Why don't you go check it out? The word witch, a huge presence at Halloween time, was unraveled. It's come through the centuries of time. From the Middle English Wicca, meaning wizard or sorceress. The Dutch, Middle Dutch root prefix Vic means to separate or set aside for religious worship. That's the Vic in Wicca. Wicca, as it's pronounced today. Implies a woman supposedly having supernatural powers by means of maintaining a secret pact with the devil or with evil spirits of the underground world. Many linguists believe our modern word victim evolved from this ancient Dutch meaning. Get it? Victim. Vic meaning to separate or set aside for religious worship. So a human sacrifice would be a victim. Today we've translated it to the criminal element. He is a victim of a crime. The closest Germanic relatives of this word have all but died out completely. Our modern English word, wicked, was also taken from the Old English word Wicca, when it passed through Middle Age English as Wicca, meaning akin to evil. Eventually, through the passing of time, the masculine form of witche, which took shape as a distant ancestor of our modern English word witch. This is related to modern German's weihen, meaning to consecrate, and even to our English word victim, signifying someone killed in a religious ritual. Again, I will reiterate, you may email me if you like, occultists and paganists. But even if you think you practice white magic and it is harmless, it is not. White magic simply is a pathway to black magic, and both have the same father. So the word's underlying connotation is a priestess. Modern German also has Hexe, meaning witch. That's where we get our modern English word hex, to jinx from. I put a hex on you. A lot of these words ultimately trace themselves back to Celtic ancestors, or to the Germanic tribes of the Angles, Saxons, and the Jutes of prehistoric documentation and written records. As you can now see, this conspiracy of embedding ancient pagan beliefs into our vocabulary history really is our own way of life, has been going for a long time. It all comes from there and has been driven from that desire to openly practice their occult religion again. In other words, to make it legal. Not only that, but to push it on you. Many important mythological events are said to have occurred on the 31st of October. Samhain. It was on Samhain that the Numidians captured the terrible Tower of Glass, built by the evil Formonians, or even beaten by the Tuatha Danann, who were more evil than the ones they defeated, the Formorians, because the Tuatha Danann are the bloodline of Cain, the destroyers, the ones who tear down man. Cain was the first murderer. The Tuatha Danann later also defeated the Ormors. That Pwyll won his wife Rhiannon from Gwawl, and many other events of a dramatic, prophetic nature took place in the Celtic myths of antiquity. Yes, I said Rhiannon, brought to life and brought back again with Fleetwood Mac and Stevie Nicks. The song's called Rhiannon, who was a sorry soul, who always lost and was always put down and always come out at the short end of the stick. You listen to the song with Fleetwood Mac and Stevie Nicks doing the lyric. Rhiannon, when will you ever win? When will you ever win? In his 17th century work, History of Ireland, Geoffrey Keating wrote that the Fomorians demanded milk, corn, 2/3 of the newly born children from the ancient race of the Neamhead for human sacrifice on the eve of Samhain, October 31st. Many of these events and occurrences had to do with the temporary victory of the forces of darkness over those of light and the constant struggle or tension between the forces of duality in nature, between up and down, light and shadow, good and evil, yin and yang, signaling the beginning of the cold and dark half of the incoming year. You see, this is the true religion of the Illuminati, the duality, where God can be cruel and good at the same time. And I say, not possible. Can't happen. God is good, or God is evil. So they have twisted our scriptures and twisted religion totally to give us this dual nature. A against B. A never wins. B never wins. The one who pit them against one another, C, always wins. And you know who that is. Space back for more in a moment on AM 640. It's a view from space.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640. Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
On the God Occult Space, it's A View from Space on AM 640. You can email at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. AD writes, Space, do you remember Brandon Crisp, a 15-year-old boy from Barrie, Ontario, who went missing on Friday, October 13th, after he got into a fight with his parents and was pronounced dead from falling out of a tree that he allegedly climbed to see where he was, meaning he was lost? I remember it like yesterday. AD. He writes, I went to school with this boy. I was reading his book, this book called The History of Magic and the Occult. And there was an entire chapter on how a young boy falling from a tree was a warning sign. I can't make full connections, but I thought I would share this with you. Lots of good information. You made me feel better about not going out tonight. Yes, I remember that case very, very well. As a matter of fact, they scoured that very area where he was found over and over and over and over and over. And then one day went back there and there he was, the body. I know what happened. Do you? No one was ever charged. No foul play. But you can bet the ritual abuse force was invoked and know of what I speak. People so high in our structure, responsible, that are untouchable. The Druids were always untouchable. Killed openly. Untouchable. How about that for fear? Fear does not come from the true God. Fear comes from Satan, who uses it. Why? To control you. Fear is the best control there is. Making you do all kinds of things that you would not normally do. For the fear of whatever. The legendary Merlin, talk about druids, was the forerunner of all the wizards of fiction, from Gandalf to Harry Potter. The historical Merlin seems to have something very different, but equally mysterious about him. He was, of course, a druid. The Roman occupation of Britain lasted from 43 AD to around 400. Before the Romans invaded, the druid priesthood was the undisputed power of the land. Openly, they are now the undisputed power that is running this world. clandestinely. For the previous 2 or 3 centuries, the Druids were a dominant force throughout what was then the Celtic world, which included France, Netherlands, part of Scandinavia, as well as Britain. History is written by the victors. Let me say that again. History is written by the victors. And this quote from Hitler keeps ringing in my head. No one ever asked the victor if he told the truth. No one. So, since history is written by the victors, this makes it very hard to get a clear picture of the people on the losing side. When the Romans conquered the Celts in ancient Britain, for example, they gave unflattering descriptions of the Druids. Some sources describe the Druids as bloodthirsty barbarians who were addicted to human sacrifice. Others maintain that they were gentle and peaceful and that they derived their authority from being in touch with nature. There are a few things we can say for certain about the Druids. Held ceremonies in oak groves. Oak is their mystical tree. Saw mistletoe as a sacred plant with healing powers. They practiced divination and believed they could foretell the future. Druids did. Their powers of divination underpinned the Druids' authority. It really gave them all their believability. They supposedly had the ability to foretell the future, made the Druids a vital source of information, equally able to advise the community on whether to start the harvest, when the king should go to war. Like Arthur's advisor, King Arthur's, Merlin, the Druids wielded a power base of their superior insight into the workings of the universe. The Druids are doing this still today, wielding power with their superior control. When you control all the banks, when you control all the weapons companies, when you control all the people's jobs, hello, you can get away with so much more than if you didn't. There's a debate among scholars as to whether human sacrifices were performed during Druid celebrations of Halloween. Of course, modern Druids are going to say that they were not. That the only evidence that this custom was practiced is a reference in an ancient Roman document by Julius Caesar. We do know that human sacrifice was practiced in this part of the world in ancient times because of several bogman mummies preserved in the peat bogs that show signs of ritual killing. Remember, the victors write the history. Of course, there are no mentions of any humans that were sacrificed by fire. Anyway, the word bonfire comes from a compound of the Middle English words bon, meaning bone, and fire, meaning a fire kindled upon bones. Bonfire. According to Dishenkus, a medieval collection of the lore of prominent places, firstborn children were sacrificed before a great idol to ensure fertility of cattle and crops. So Eve was a night of dread and of danger. At this juncture, in the old year and the new, our world and the other world opened up to each other. The dead returned, ghosts and demons were abroad, and the future could be seen. Behind such Halloween games as bobbing for apples lie Celtic divination arts to discern who would marry, thrive, or die in the coming year. Behind the masks and mischief, the jack-o'-lanterns and food offerings, lurk the fear of evil spirits and the rites to perform those rituals. Tacitus writes of the blood-stained druid altars of Anglesey in Wales. Julius Caesar wrote about Celtic sacrifices. The whole nation of the Gauls is greatly devoted to ritual observances, and for that reason, those who are smitten with the more grievous melodies and who are engaged in the perils of battle either sacrifice human victims or vowed to do so, employing the Druids as ministers for such sacrifices. They believe in effect that unless for a man's life be paid, the majesty of the immortal gods may not be appeased. And in public, as in private life, they observe an ordinance of sacrifices of the same kind. Others use figures of immense size, whose limbs, woven out of twigs, they will fill with living men and set on fire, and the men perish in a sheet of flame. The sacrifices were called the Wicca Men. And get what the big rage is a few weeks ago. The Wicca bonfires. Quite a few people I know were talking about it and wanting to go and participate in the Wicca fires. I'm telling you now, it was human sacrifice. In those ancient days, they believed that the execution of those who had been caught in the act of theft or robbery or some crime is more pleasing to the immortal gods, but when the supply of such fails, they resort to the execution even of the innocent. The classical author Diodorus Siculus also reported scenes of human sacrifice by the Druids. When they attempt divination upon important matters, they practice a strange and incredible custom, for they kill a man by a knife stab in the region above his midriff. After the sacrificial victim falls dead, they foretell the future by the convulsions of his limbs and the pouring of his blood. They kill the man, and then watch him die, and then interpret the movement and the blood spillage to foretell the future? Demonic, satanic. In 1984, the discovery of a sacrificial victim in Cheshire, England, helped validate the reality of ritualistic human sacrifice. The well-preserved young man had apparently belonged to an elite social class in the 2nd century BC. After a couple of sharp blows to the head, he had been strangled. Then, like the countless sacrifices of the Aztec and Mayan gods, his body had been drained off the human blood needed to appease and please their gods. Let me bring you up to date on the Druids of today. Cherie Blair, the wife of ex-British Prime Minister Tony Blair, the one who is being touted as the front-runner to be the first president of the European Union. Made news for her friendship with a Druid priestess a few years ago. They got on famously because, although the reasons may not seem immediately clear, they had a lot in common. Cherie Blair's extraordinary friendship with Dwina Murphy-Gibb, erotic artist, one-time fetish magazine model, part-time Druid priestess, and bisexual. Dwina Murphy-Gibb is married to Bee Gees singer Robin Gibb. And their friendship drew criticism, not for Dwina Murphy-Gibb's wild past, but for her relationship with the woman-led group Brahma Kumaris. Even by the standards of some of Cherie Blair's previous friends, former glamour model Carol Kaplan, for instance, Dwina's past is colorful, almost beyond belief. But there is something else, potentially dangerous too, that yet again places a question mark against Cherie Blair's judgment and the almost kamikaze, ill-advised way she takes on certain friendships. The Brahma Kumaris group has been accused of controlling followers and has gained controversy for advising adherents, including married partners, to live a life of celibacy. But while the connection to the religious group has some concern, the real start of this attention was due to a winter holiday at Robin Gibbs' home in Miami, Florida. The villa, built in 1948, had become a famous venue for decadent parties. Robin Gibb, the former Bee Gee, was described his marriage as totally open. "We like to cruise," he says, "and we like to watch." Tony Blair, in fact, has a habit of staying at that home. The Gibbs Villa, built in 1948, has become a famous venue for decadent parties, and amidst this controversy and gossip, Duena Murphy Gibbs' connections to Druidism, she's a patroness of the OBOD, are just one more shocking adjective alongside bisexuality, wild parties. Can you be friends with someone with a wild lifestyle and yet not live it? Can you be a druid priestess, as is Sherry Blair, and the wife of ex-British Prime Minister Tony Blair? Could you be married to a person who is not a druid? I hardly think so. Druidism is not only alive, but flourishing. In 2009, Tony Blair, touted to be the very first president of the European Union after the Lisbon Treaty is ratified, which will turn that European Union into a superstate, replacing the United States of America as the policeman of the world, as the economic engine of the world. Space, back with more in a moment on AM 640, The View from Space.
He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But you can take it. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
Spaceman AM 640 and A View from Space. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Halloween has changed over the past 30 years in two really important ways. First, children have been encouraged to participate by donning such inoffensive costumes as Barbie, Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man. Secondly, adult costuming and parties have reached a tremendous apex and has become a most macabre day of celebration. The costumes are getting more macabre, more grotesque, as this celebration is continued year after year. Historically, Halloween is the deadliest holiday ever celebrated in human history. This satanic night is dedicated to the Celtic Lord of the Dead, also symbolized by the horned god and the stag god. The Druids celebrated Samhain as a 3-day fire festival, building huge bonfires, thought to ward off demons that roamed around. Also, the fires provided the means by which the required human sacrifice would be presented to the sun god, Osiris. In enormous wicker baskets, the priests caged both human and animal sacrifices too, which they then lowered into the flames. Think this didn't happen? It's historical accounts. And why did these victims die? After they were lowered into the flames, the priests would carefully watch how the victim died in order to predict whether the future held good or evil. Free candy. What better way is there to bait and trap children into this macabre ritual? Kids so full of life, looking for just innocence of let everything live and let live. And they enter into this world that's been placed a death culture. And the biggest teacher of that transition is Halloween, this holiday. This pagan practice is over 2,000 years old for the sake of their safety and well-being. Remember, people put outside their homes sweets, the best mutton legs, vegetables, eggs, poultry, honey, and even wine, so the wandering of evil spirits would consume them on their way back to the netherworld. Failure to treat these evil spirits might result in a curse being put on the home. The people literally believed that. When these spirits came to your door, they would trick you if you did not treat them. And we, like robots, keep on with the tradition and keep it alive for the elite rich, who are going to, one day and very soon, make this the only religion left. They will outlaw all others. They will legislate the Luciferian religion as the only religion of the world. It's coming, believe me. People would also take burning wisps from the bonfires and wave them around to frighten away the many evil spirits roaming the earth. In case the burning wisps alone wouldn't work, revelers clothed themselves in the most hideous and terrifying costumes. They believed that if you dressed in a terrifying costume and went trooping around with the spirits all night, they would think you were one of them and would leave you alone, working on fear once again. Satan's obsession with fire has made his followers also as obsessed with building huge bonfires. The bonfires symbolize the sun, the ancient Egyptian sun god Ra. These bonfires were practical in that they provided the means for the priests who put to death the human and animal sacrifices so crucial to Halloween. When the last fires died out, people would race each other down the hills shouting, "The devil gets the last one down." Samhain was also the time to engage the devil's assistance in divining the future. Questions concerning marriage, luck, health, the time of a person's death were the most popular subjects of divination. In Scotland, young people got together for games and pulled shoots out of the ground to ascertain which of them would marry during the coming year, and in what order the marriages should even occur. This was the power of the Druid high priests. They had the power over every facet of life, and still do, as I've already pointed out. For centuries, apples have been a token of love and fertility. You just have to go back to the Garden of Eden for that. And if you slice an apple open in half, you see the pentagram design at the very core. And it was said to have been the apple that Eve offered to Adam for the fall of man. Very perplexing is that symbolism. At Halloween parties, people bobbled for apples in the tubs of water. Apples still in front of us, you know, with the bite out of it even, taking you back to the garden. Apple computers. If a boy came up with an apple in one of the bobbing for apples in a tub between his teeth, he was assured of the love of his girl. You know what the game was called? The Snap Apple game. It was a game where the boys played. Each boy in his turn would spring up to attempt to bite an apple that was being twirled on the end of a stick or in the water. The first boy to succeed would be the first to marry. Sometimes string it's used to suspend the apple in the air. Now you know where the company Snapple got its name. Just another way to perpetuate the ancient pagan rituals into our culture and keep those symbols alive. Apple seeds were also used to tell fortunes. Peeling an apple in one long piece was supposed to tell a young girl about her future. The girl would swing the apple peel 3 times around her head, then throw it over her left shoulder. If the peeling fell unbroken, the girl would examine the shape into which it fell to see if she could ascertain the initials of her future husband. Owls, bats, cats, toads are an essential part of Halloween, and for a very good reason. They are known as the witches' familiars. A divining familiar was the species of animal whose shape Satan would assume to aid the witch in telling the future. A witch would closely watch the animal's movements, whether slow or fast, and she would see the direction in which the animal moved and the kinds of sounds it made in order to foretell the length of life and or coming illness. Other familiar spirit shapes include hens, geese, small dogs, rats, butterflies, crickets, wasps, snails. Witches considered these creatures to be demon-possessed and controlled. If you look closely at most Halloween decorations, you'll see all the animals I just named. But now you know. They represent demon-possessed creatures. That's why they're Halloween symbols. Spaceman. And a view from space. That's all it is. On AM 640. Returns in a moment.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640. He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But you can take it. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
Well, I gotta go space on AM 640, and it's A View from Space. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. So I've pretty much showed you how Snapple, the company, got its name from the Snap Apple game. An ancient game that was used for divination. Various names for jack-o'-lanterns were lantern men, hobble-langer, will-o'-the-wisp. The lantern men got their name from the pale, eerie lights that appear over bogs and marshes. And these ghostly lights, which bobbed along like a lantern in someone's hand, were called corpses' candles. Candles were said to be signals from the souls of men lost at sea. Celts often hollowed out a turnip and carved a grotesque face on it to fool demons. They carried such lanterns to light their way in the dark and to ward off evil spirits. The turnip is still popular in Europe today. The pumpkin has replaced it in North America. Jack is a nickname for John, of course, which is common slang, the word meaning man. Jack-o'-lantern literally means man with a lantern. Here's the real truth about the origin of the jack-o'-lantern that I alluded to earlier in tonight's show on A View from Space on AM 640. The Druids originated the practice of hollowing out the jack-o'-lanterns and filling them with human fat. Yes, human fat. Whenever a raiding party came to a home... Now let me explain the raiding party. Remember I said that there were 3 days of celebration at Samhain in the ancient days. The Druids controlled every aspect of everyone's life, as the Illuminati do today. And how did they do it? They do it today, and they did it yesterday. The Druids did, with fear. Now, in order to instill fear into someone, you have to have the power to threaten them, and the power to carry it out. Today, you have fear of losing your job. You have fear of dying of a disease. You have fear of someone killing you when you go home. You have fear from every walk of life. Fear that a bug is in your computer. We have fear on every single level. We are being attacked. Armies are not being attacked today. They're just killing our soldiers off one by one, which really isn't amounting to incredible amount of casualties. But what it is psychologically controlling. That's what IEDs, the roadside bombs, are used for. Not for killing masses in the armed forces, but it's killing 1 or 2 to demoralize, to work on your psyche, to psychologically exhaust you. So the Druids had raiding parties when these 3 days came along where anything goes. To demand of the husband that someone inside be surrendered as a human sacrifice. They would light a jack-o'-lantern filled with human fat if the husband gave in at that house and provided one of his loved ones as a sacrifice. The Druid party would leave a jack-o'-lantern on the porch. This lantern would be to tell the other raiding parties coming later and the demonic host that this party had surrendered a human for sacrifice, and that the remaining people inside were to be left alone, guaranteeing that no one else in the house that night would be killed. That was the treat. If the husband refused to surrender one of his family, a trick would be placed upon the house. The members of the raiding party would draw a large hexagram using human blood on the front door. Where'd they get the blood? They got the blood for the hexagram from a dead body they dragged around with them using a cable tow. The next procession of Druids coming along would see the blood-drawn hexagram and attack the inhabitants of the house, taking what they wanted anyway. By doing this ritual Halloween, it was a truly scary night, driving some people insane, as a matter of fact, as was the goddess of witchcraft, Hecate's expertise, driving man insane. It's doing it with your soldiers in Afghanistan. It's driving them insane. They're turning on one another, killing one another in the tents. That's what it does to you. It psychologically exhausts you till you're so distraught. You do these things. After after hearing the origin of the jack-o'-lantern, the truth, were you still willing to go out and buy a pumpkin next year and put it on your front door porch landing, in your window? You really would? Because you think it's harmless? If symbols didn't mean anything, and their origin didn't mean anything, then why don't we just have swastikas in churches? Why the hell not? It's just a cool-looking sun worship wheel. Why not? Doesn't matter. Who cares about where it came from or why it was used? It's just a symbol. It doesn't matter. This is the true origin of the trick-or-treat, the jack-o'-lantern. And you take your kids trick-or-treating, here are some satanic practices that are absolutely forbidden. And every one of them is uniquely associated with Halloween. Enchantment, act of influencing by charms and incantation using the practice of magical arts. These practices draw directly on the power of Satan. Witchcraft, dealing with demonic spirits, using their prescribed methods, commonly called rituals and the magic arts. Today, thanks to Harry Potter, the Lord of the Rings, things like that, witchcraft is skyrocketing in popularity. Television shows that show witches are on every channel. You don't have to wait till Halloween. And when Halloween does come, so when comes, it is wall to wall with that stuff. Go to a video store sometime. Walk down the horror aisle, where you'll see the popularity of witchcraft the world is tapping into today. Sorcery. Use of power gained from the prescribed rituals demanded by the demonic host. Once the witch or wizard performs a particular ritual correctly, the demonic host is required to provide the power to accomplish the action desired by the witch. Let me tell you how sorcery is used in computing. Some demons that you call up in the ritual have over 197 syllables. Can you imagine that? And if you don't get every single of those 197 pieces together and put all of those syllables together, 197 of them, and say them all correctly, the demon does not come. Now, isn't that exactly the same way when you type in a long address to the computer? If you don't have exactly every character in line perfectly, I mean perfectly, you have to say it exactly the way the ritual wants you to say it, you don't get to the site. It doesn't go, oh, that was close enough, and then directs you to it. No, you missed. You got a period out of place. You put the E before the A. In some cases, you capitalized. It's the same MO as conjuring up demons when you use your computer. Because that's where it's taken from, copied from. Space, back with more in a moment on AM 640 and the View from Space.
You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the rights to free speech while he still can, on AM 640.
I'm the guy that calls Space. You can email me, space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Got a comment? You have some information to pass along? was just running through some, words that are connected with Halloween, the holiday, such as sorcery, witchcraft, enchantment. Every one of these is uniquely associated with Samhain. Divination, fortune-telling and seeing into the future. Satan loves to get people consumed by the idea that they can actually know what lies ahead. Wizardry, the art of practices of a wizard. Sorcery, a wizard or witch is one skilled in the magic arts, a sorcerer. Necromancy, communication with the dead, specifically conjuring up spirits of the dead for purposes of magically revealing the future or influencing courses of events. Helena Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophic religion, comes to mind immediately. Charm, the practice of putting a spell on someone in order to change or control their mind and or behavior. Wizards love to get their enemies one-on-one because they can charm them through the use of ritual done before the meeting and by the demonic host living within them. Adolf Hitler followed this practice closely as he dealt with the leaders of Europe, Britain, and Russia. British Prime Minister Chamberlain was totally charmed by Hitler as he tried to appease the German dictator in Munich. In 1938, Chamberlain was so totally charmed by Hitler, he enthusiastically proclaimed after returning from Munich that he had achieved peace in our time. Stargazing, or astrology, divination of the supposed influence of the stars and other heavenly bodies on human lives and the affairs of nations. Occultists literally order their lives according to astrology and numerics. The three guiding parts of the Illuminati are sacred geometry, astrology, and numerology. Magic, tapping into the power of the demonic realm through the use of prescribed rituals so that the action carried out is accomplished through demonic power. All these activities are uniquely associated with the activities and traditions of Samhain, or as you know it, Halloween. One more thing on Halloween. If you've been paying attention, you will know that these practices form the heart and the soul of the Harry Potter novels and movies. Harry Potter is a wizard, and he comes from a family of witches and wizards. Generational witchcraft, passed on in the bloodline. His entire existence within these novels revolves around the Hogwarts School of Wizardry and Witchcraft, where Harry and his friends learn all the forbidden practices. I mean, after all, if you've read the books, you probably have, or know about them. What was Harry Potter's favorite holiday? Halloween. J.K. Rowling makes all of this satanic activity seem so cool and so much fun that tens of millions of children have been attracted to the dark arts. In the song Sons of Silence by Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel, we're told of seeds that were left while an entire generation was sleeping, and that the vision that was planted in my brain still remains, which is actually a line from the song Sounds of Silence. Now, in year 2009. All the foundations for occultism and witchcraft are in place. The Illuminati have moved quickly because time is running out. It was the communist revolutionary Lenin who said, "Give me one generation of youth, and I will transform the entire world." Now an entire generation of youth has been given to a woman named J.K. Rowling and her books on witchcraft known as the Harry Potter series. Rowling uses same imagery in her Harry Potter books as was contained in the alchemy book, The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz, written in 1459, using such an obscure book, known only to the occult initiated, is one more very strong clue, indication that J.K. Rowling practices witchcraft, which she denies over and over. But it couldn't possibly be. This book, The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz, is the basis, the entire basis for initiation rituals for the Rosicrucians. The founder, Helena Blavatsky. Rowling's true nature comes out, despite her repeated denials that she is not involved in witchcraft. You can see, as well as I, she displays detailed and intimate knowledge of Satanism. She is now demonstrating intimate knowledge of a very old, very obscure book that is used as a basis for initiating people into Rosicrucianism. Harry is told the lightning bolt on his forehead was when a powerful evil curse touches you. The significance to that mark of the beast cannot be overlooked as we draw ever closer to the end of time and of the Antichrist. That children worldwide are painting the mark on their foreheads to align with the Harry Potter stories and Harry the Witch should alert even the least religiously informed person that this is not a good thing. Goblins are demons called elemental spirits. Occultist Blavatsky wrote, "The creatures evolved in the 4 kingdoms of the earth, air, fire, and water, called the Kabbalist gnomes. Sylphs, salamanders, and undines may be employed in the disembodied spirits, whether pure or impure, and by living the depths of magic and sorcery to produce desired phenomenal results. Fairies and fays. These spirits of the elements appear in the myth, fable, tradition, or poetry of all nations, ancient and modern. Their names are Legion, Paris, Devs, Jinn, Sylvan, Stirs, Fauns, Elves, Dwarfs, Trolls, Gnomes, Misses, Kobolds, Brownies, Stromkarls, Necks, Undines, Nixies, Salamanders, Goblins, Pooks, Banshees, Kelpies, Pixies. It's all the same thing. Evil spirits. These elementals are the main agents at seances and the producers of all phenomena. That from Helena Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophical religion. A quote now from Howard Pyle, an American illustrator and author on the Dark Ages. He states, "Between the far-away past history of the world and that which lies near to us, in the time when the wisdom of the ancient times was dead and had passed away, and our own days of light had not yet come, there lay a great black gulf in human history, a gulf of ignorance, superstition, cruelty, wickedness. That time we call the Dark, or Middle Ages. Few records remain to us of that dreadful period in our world's history, and we only know of it through broken and disjointed fragments that have been handed down to us through the generations. Howard Pyle himself is guilty of twisting the truth. Listen, The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood is Howard Pyle's greatest work, where he put together many traditional Robin Hood legends and ballads, making them a cohesive whole. He toned them down, though, to make them suitable for your children. This is how they teach the lies to your children. Harry Potter is the latest attack on our kids. Halloween's passed off as a wonderful time for children. How is Howard Pyle himself guilty of twisting the truth? When I return on A View from Space. This is Talk Radio, AM 640 and A View from Space.
He goes deeper into today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But you can take it. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm the guy that goes space. It's A View from Space on AM 640. Talk Radio. You can email me at space@640toronto.com. Spaceman@640toronto.com. Again, I can't thank you enough for the information you provide me. Just a moment ago, I was talking about the West Memphis 3. I didn't mention Peter Jackson's name, but someone's just emailed me with the information that's a follow-up to that show, really, where Peter Jackson is trying to aid one of those West Memphis 3. You see, I believe that cult that Peter Jackson belongs to, that Johnny Depp belongs to, that there are a few others that slip my mind at the moment, that were involved actively trying to free them for years. They spent 18 years in jail. And just a moment ago, Peter Jackson story broke that he is trying to aid one of those West Memphis 3 and doing it publicly. I mean, they're getting away with murder. And making not millions, billions. Now, just before the break, I said when I return, I'll show you how Howard Pyle himself is guilty of twisting the truth. Well, his greatest work is The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, putting together a whole bunch of legends and ballads and making them into a cohesive whole story. And of course, he toned them down a lot to make them suitable for kids, of course, because there is a very, very, very strong message in Robin Hood. And it's not about stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. It's about crusades. Robin Hood loved King Richard I, whose only passion in life, Richard's, was to begin the Third Crusade again. Of course, to take Jerusalem from the Muslims, demonize Christianity, put his family member in the temple in Jerusalem and rule the world from there. That's the plan. So you see how he will twist information to make them suitable for children, because this is how they teach the lies to our children, witchcraft to our kids. Harry Potter is the latest attack. Halloween is passed off today as a wonderful time for kids. Well, this is how Howard Pyle himself is guilty of twisting the truth. He modified the ballad Robin Hood's Progress to Nottingham. He changed it from Robin Hood killing 14 foresters for not honoring a debt to Robin defending himself against a band of armed robbers. That's a lie, then, wouldn't it be? Not just twist. That's a lie. What's more, the author of Robin Hood's Merry Adventures, Howard Pyle, has Robin kill only one man, who shoots at him first. There are tales in which Robin steals all that an ambushed traveler carried, such as Robin Hood and the Bishop of Hereford, are changed so that the victim keeps a third, and another third is, well, dedicated to the poor. A little charity going on with Robin Hood. What a wonderful person he is. And backing the Crusader, King Richard I. The Battle of Bunker Hill, Howard Pyle, 1897, shows the second British charge up Breed's Hill. It's inaccurate in showing the march going over the fallen casualties in the first charge. In fact, the first charge was against a rail fence, which would have been on the far right of the scene. Pirates fight over treasure in a Howard Pyle illustration also. Pyle did not have much more concern for historical accuracy than the original balladeers, who were the bards in those days, did either. The bards were the media in those ancient days. They spread the propaganda for those in power, the Druids. The ones in power were the Druids, are the Druids. The secret force behind the kings and queens are the Druids, who guide them through their reign using the ancient art of black magic, witchcraft, to keep the power. The bards, in their plays and songs, spoke and sang of these personages to make them larger than life. They stretched the battles and the events to the point where they made them out to be superhuman. Much like if I mentioned Babe Ruth today, you would know how much it was stretched. To make them as gods, therefore giving them the right to rule over the masses. They went from town to town, the bards did, putting on plays, singing songs that transformed the elite acts into acts of heroism through their superhuman abilities. You see, the Druids, sun worshippers, were in fact the government in those days, the law, and the priests in those times. So I've already stated, the bards, who played the role of today's media in those times, twisted and lied outright about real events that took place, just like what Howard Pyle did in his adventures, Merry Adventures of Robin Hood. Another example of what I mean. It's found in what's now called a classic piece of literature, The Merry Adventure of Robin Hood. Author, Howard Pyle. He alters the name of the queen consort in the story, Robin Hood, and Queen Catherine to Eleanor of Aquitaine, which made the tall tale sync up with the timing in history, where King Richard I, whom Robin Hood fights for and badly wants back on the throne of England, fights against the exiled king's brother, the mean, awful King John. The key to understanding here is that King Richard I's highest priority again was to begin the Third Crusade, to take Jerusalem. The Kabbalist leaders of London came to his court, in fact, bearing valuable gifts to help him pay for that crusade. But as they were not allowed in the royal court, they were beaten and even caused riots in England. King Richard I was profoundly disturbed at this backlash of the people, these Kabbalists, who were ready to give him everything that he needed for the Crusades, but were attacked. He was trying to raise all the money he could for his crusade by selling anything that he could. He knew the family plan and wanted to get it done himself, and wanted King Richard I of the Merovingian bloodline, to be that global leader and rule the world from Jerusalem. That's why he wanted badly to go on the crusade, the third one. And that fight continues with that bloodline today. That's how we know it's the royal family that is pulling the strings in the Middle East. That fight continues today. It's merely the continuation since the beginning of the Garden of Eden of the satanic quest of pitting one badly splintered religion against another badly splintered religion in order to demonize both, with the end goal of blaming all the world's wars and problems on those two religions in order to form a one-world government as the only way to peace, and ultimately to replace these religions with only one religion, Luciferianism, which places one king, possessed by Satan himself, Soin himself, on the throne of the world to be worshipped as God. None of the tales of the Robin Hood book, by the way, were Howard Pyle's own invention. In fact, they date back to the late Middle Ages. You see, the Druids are still in control, twisting and lying about the history of man just as they do today. Their goal has never changed either. It's to mount a final crusade in the Middle East. You can see that easily now manifesting itself daily, almost, in our headlines. The fullest account of the Druids and their religion is that which is given by Julius Caesar in his history of his wars in Gaul in 59 to 51 BC. Caesar is insistent that Druidism originated in Britain, although there was no necessity to believe that all the features of the religion as it was practiced in Gaul were present in Britain. Druidism originated in the Middle East. Interpreting Druidism is difficult because the Druids refused to commit anything about their beliefs and rituals to writing. And modern inquirers are obliged to rely on the accounts of the classical authors who have a tendency to concentrate on the strange side of the Druids. Later evidence in the early literature of Wales, and more particularly that of Ireland, gives you a much clearer idea. Through a process of selection and modification by Christian scribes, the essence of Druidism seems to have been a kind of pantheism, and links have been discerned between it and some aspects of Hinduism too. The names of 400 gods are known, most of whom seem to have had a very localized cult. The correct performance of ritual was central to the religion, and the prescribed pattern of ceremonies presumably constituted the greater part of the 20-year training undertaken by an apprentice Druid. Yes, you trained for 20 years. Human sacrifice was practiced. When the Druids of Anglesey were attacked by the Romans in 61 AD, their altars, according to Tacitus, were drenched with the blood of prisoners, as the Romans considered Druidism to be a nationalistic religion. Underpinning British resistance to the empire, they were determined to destroy the Druids. They were the real power in the land, and they knew they would have to go. In the 18th century, with the growing interest in natural religion and in the noble savage, Druidism captured the imagination of the European intelligentsia. In Wales, the Welsh poetic tradition was believed to have been inherited from the Druids. More on this when I return on A View from Space, Talk Radio, AM 640.
You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the right to free speech while he still can, on AM 640.
Spaceman AM 640 and A View from Space. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. I was talking about the Druids practicing learning for 20 years. You see, the Druids, the Vates, and the Bards were teachers, historians, astronomers, poets. They controlled the legal system, acted as the judges, supervised executions. Each Druid was required to learn by heart the whole of the law, teaching poetry, story, myth, religious observance, astronomy, astrology, genealogy, tribal history. So you can see why it would take up to around 20 years. Guess who is going through all of this? Prince William. Brought up by the Druids. They also had a fearsome reputation for magic. They were believed to have the ability to raise storms, winds, and mists, to make the sun stand still in its course. They could divine the secret names of the gods of their enemies and call these out in battle to make the opposing tribes tremble with fear. In the middle of a war, they can even command the opposing factions to lay down their arms. More than 2,000 years ago, in an area we know now as Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, Druid priests capitalized on fears by nurturing the belief that evil spirits were responsible for bringing about the advent of cold weather, shorter hours of daylight. To placate the spirits, the priests initiated a festival honoring Soan, the Lord of the Dead. The festival was on October 31st, the day before the beginning of the Celtic New Year. This New Year's Eve celebration gradually grew to ominous proportions. Yes, they made people extinguish all of their hearth fires and to gather around the huge bonfires on hilltops. And you were not allowed to have fires in your house unless it was lit by one of the flaming embers from one of the large fires. And they were the ones to reignite the hearth fires in each home. They controlled them down to where they could get the start for their fire for the year. That's where it all came from. This day of ghosts, you'll be celebrating witches and goblins and grotesque creatures. It's also a day of orange and black, of candles and jack-o'-lanterns. Yes, they were worshippers of the sun, the moon, and the stars. There are 13 full moons every year. Halloween is a reverse 13 on the 31st. The cult's number is 13. 13 in a coven. Witches have special days for celebrating each Sabbat. And in those days in England, there was another kind of witchcraft that ruled. These Druids, called the Men of Oaks, were a strange clan of men who dressed in white robes. The Druids worshipped Cernunnos, the horned hunter of the night. Halloween was sacred to the Druids because their sun god receded to the underworld on October 31, which is why darkness increased and light decreased according to their reckoning. Now, have you carved out a jack-o'-lantern and set it on your step? Here's the real truth about the origin of the jack-o'-lantern. As darkness set on October 31st, a group of druids would put on their white robes and hoods. They would carry sickles and Celtic crosses as they began a torchlight procession. At the beginning of that procession, a male slave was killed and dragged by a rope fastened to his left ankle. The left ankle is the left-hand path. This is known as the black magic path. Black magic harms people. White magic tries to do good to people. The rope is fastened to his left ankle. The druids would walk until they came to a house or a village where they shout the equivalent of trick or treat. The treat was a slave girl or any female to be given to the druids. If the people refused to give a girl as a treat, blood was taken from the dead slave and used to draw a hexagram or six-pointed star on the door or wall. Spirits of the horned hunter of the night were invoked by the druids to kill someone in that house or village by fear that night. In the house or village, if they gave a girl as a treat, the druids would put a pumpkin with a face carved in it in front of the door or gate of that place. Inside the pumpkin was a candle made of human tallow to keep evil spirits away. You see, the jack-o'-lantern was and is a sign that you have cooperated with Satan. The treats, or female victims, were taken to Stonehenge, where they were raped and killed and then sacrificed on the sacred bonfire, or bonefire, as it was called, until only glowing embers were left. That's what Stonehenge was really about. The bonefire. The origin of the modern-day bonfire. As a matter of luck for winter survival, all villagers were expected to use those glowing embers of the bonfire to light their hearths with. The druids commanded even more power, demanding all the people take part in their ritual of human sacrifice. So as you can clearly see, Halloween is not harmless. Satan has people in this modern era mimicking the witches and druids of old. We live now in a time when witchcraft is being revived. Movies are filled with it. Television shows are teaching it. Harry Potter books are flooded, have already flooded the children's minds. So have the movies that accompanied the books. And we still insist it's a wonderful celebration for children. And how more diabolically clever can you get to teach someone witchcraft with free candy if you do it? You ever wonder where the source of black and orange as the colors of Halloween comes from? Have to go back to the Druids again. Dark vestments, black, brown, or purple, were worn by the Druid priests. The candles used in the services were of unbleached beeswax. You know what the color of unbleached beeswax is? It's orange. The Druids borrowed those colors for their own. In the occult, black represents knowledge. And the beehive gives the beeswax. And if you look at the structure of nature setting up a beehive, that is exactly the way the Illuminati want to set up the next system, the New World Order, with the queen bee at the very top, and the drones and the workers and all the rest of them in their own little spots. The beehive is exactly the blueprint for the hierarchical assembly of the New World Order to come. So, masks. People are going to be wearing masks. And are already. Maybe out listening to me and you've just taken yours off. Let me point something out about masks to you that you may not know. There are spiritual ramifications to mask wearing that actually have far-reaching consequences, which, by the way, are always used in satanic rituals today. The mask, you see, you are left vulnerable to the spirits connected with the masks. You are asking the demonic spirits. No, that's not totally correct. You are inviting them to be a part of you. Since masks allow you to be anonymous, you can do things that you would not normally do. You are putting on another persona. In short, you are being possessed. You are willing a spirit through your body that is not you. We are meant to keep our own identity. There is no other person in the 7 billion of us here that is like you. You are totally and absolutely unique. There is only one of you. There will never be another either. So there are so many ugly things in Halloween. If you look beneath the shallow top of having fun and just costuming up, there are ramifications. Everything we do, everything, there is a reaction to. The black cat origin when I return. Approaching Halloween on a View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio. Back in a minute.
The ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded, and he goes deeper than a black hole into today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm a Spaceman. It's A View from Space on AM 640. You can email me, space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Thanks for the ones I've already received. I really and truly appreciate them so much. Now, sweets and trick-or-treat. Free candy. What better way, as I said, to bait a person, little children, into wanting, waiting, desiring to take part in this macabre ritual. horrifying costumes, bonfires symbolizing the sun. Snap apple. You ever heard of snap apple? Ever heard of Snapple? That's the company that got its name. Just another way to perpetuate the ancient pagan rituals into our culture. Also, when you split open an apple, by the way, half of it shows a pentagram, a 5-pointed star in the middle, which is why the pentagram is the symbol for Venus, the woman, the goddess of love. The apple in Eden. Get it? For centuries, apples have been a token of love and fertility. At Halloween parties, people bobbed for apples in tubs of water. If a boy comes up with an apple between his teeth, he's assured of the love of his girl. It's called the Snap Apple game. It was a game the boys played. Each boy in his turn would spring up to attempt to bite an apple that was being twirled at the end of a stick. The first boy to succeed would be the first one to marry. Sometimes a string was used to suspend the apple in the air. Apple seeds were also used to tell fortunes. Peeling an apple in one long piece was supposed to tell a young girl about her future. The girl would swing the apple peel 3 times around her head, then throw it over her left shoulder. If the peeling fell unbroken, the girl would examine the shape into which it fell to see if she could ascertain the initials of her future husband. Owls, bats, cats, toads are an essential part of Halloween, aren't they, for a very good reason. They're known as the witches' familiars. A divining familiar was a species of animal whose shape Satan could assume to aid the witch in telling the future. A witch would closely watch the animal's movements, whether slow or fast, and she would see the direction in which the animal moved and the kinds of sounds it made in order to foretell the length of life or illness, coming illness, say. Other familiar spirit shapes include hens, geese, small dogs, rats, crickets, butterflies, snails, wasps. Now, it's just an incredible, deep, mysterious past that Halloween has that no one that I know has even inquired about. Just taking it at face value. And also, it's a very occult date, very important, very powerful. It's the highest Illuminati ritual celebration of all of the Sabbats. It's the highest one. October 31st in history. Many important mythological events are said to have occurred on this day. October the 31st. It was on a Soen day that the Nemedians captured the terrible Tower of Glass built by the evil Fomorians, that the Tuatha De Danann later defeated the Ormors once and for all, that Pwyll won his wife Rhiannon from Gwal, and that many other events of dramatic or prophetic nature took place in the Celtic myths of antiquity. In his 17th century work, History of Ireland, Geoffrey Keating wrote that the Fomorians demanded milk, corn, and 2/3 of the newly born children from the ancient race of the Neamhead for human sacrifice on the eve of Samhain. Many of these events and occurrences had to do with the temporary victory of the forces of darkness over those of the light, the constant struggle or tension between the forces of duality in nature, which they're applying even today, between up, down, light, shadow, good, evil, yin-yang, signaling the beginning of the cold and dark half of the coming year. Yes, human sacrifice on Halloween. It's their highest witching holiday. This is a debate among scholars as to whether human sacrifice were actually performed during Celtic celebrations of Halloween. Of course, modern Druids will say that they were not. They say that the only evidence that this custom was practiced is a reference in an ancient Roman document by Julius Caesar. We do know that human sacrifice was practiced in this part of the world in ancient times because of several bogman mummies preserved in the peat bogs that show signs of ritual killing. It's still going on today. Of course, there would be no mention of any humans that were sacrificed in any fire. The word bone fire comes from a compound English words of bone and fire, meaning a fire kindled upon bones. And according to Jinkanus, a medieval collection of the lore of prominent places, firstborn children were sacrificed before a great idol to ensure fertility of cattle and crops. So an Eve was a night of dread and danger. At this juncture of the old year and the new, our world and the other world opened up to each other. The dead returned. Ghosts and demons were abound. The future could be seen. The veil between the spirit world and the third dimensional world you and I live in, the physical world, was at its thinnest then. So men could go into the spiritual world easiest, and the spirits could come into our world the easiest. Behind Halloween games like bobbing for apples lies Celtic divination arts to discern who would marry, thrive, or die in the coming year. Behind the masks and mischief, the jack-o'-lanterns, food offerings, lurks the fear of evil spirits and the right to perform the rituals. Tacitus wrote of the blood-stained druid altars at Anglesey in Wales. Julius Caesar wrote about the Celtic sacrifices. The whole nation of the Gauls is greatly devoted to ritual observances, and for that reason, those who are smitten with the more grievous maladies and who are engaged in the perils of battle, either human sacrifice victims or vow so to do, employing the Druids as ministers for those sacrifices. They believe, in effect, that unless for a man's life be paid, the majesty of the immortal gods may not be appeased, and in public, as in private life, they observe an ordinance of sacrifices of the same kind, even today. Others use figures of immense size, whose limbs, woven out of twigs, they fill with living men and set on fire, and the men perish in a sheet of flame. These sacrifices were called Wicca men. They believed that the execution of those who had been caught in the act of theft or robbery of some crime is more pleasing to the immortal gods, but when the supply of those types fail, they resort to the execution of even the innocent. The classical author, Diodorus Siculus, also reported scenes of human sacrifice by the Druids. When they attempt divination upon important matters, they practice a strange and incredible custom, where they kill a man by a knife stab in the region above his midriff. After the sacrificial victim fell dead, they foretold the future by the convulsions of his limbs and the pouring of his blood. In 1984 was the latest discovery of a sacrificial victim in Cheshire, England. Helped validate the reality of ritualistic human sacrifice by the Druids. It was a well-preserved young man who had apparently belonged to an elite social class in the second century BC. After a couple of blows, sharp ones to the head, he had been strangled. Then, like the countless sacrifices to Aztec Mayan gods, his body had been drained of the blood needed to please and appease their gods. Yes, they practiced sorcery, divination, wizardry, necromancy, communication with the dead, specifically conjuring up the spirits of the dead for purpose of magically revealing the future or influencing the course of events. You've heard the connotation, charmed. Or he's a very charming person. That's the practice of putting a spell on someone in order to change or control their mind or their behavior. The Druid wizards love to get their enemies one-on-one because they can charm them through the use of ritual done before the meeting and by demonic hosts living within them. Adolf Hitler followed this practice closely as he dealt with the leaders of Europe, Britain, and Russia. British Prime Minister Chamberlain was totally charmed by Hitler as he tried to appease the German dictator in Munich in 1938, before the Second World War started. Chamberlain was so totally charmed by Hitler, he enthusiastically proclaimed after returning from Munich he had achieved peace in our time. I'm sure. Stargazing and astrology is also a huge part of the Druids' way of doing things. So as you can see, tonight's show, as I showcase astrology and numerology, that the Druids are still in control and are bound and determined to finish the great work, the installation of a new world order, a new system. You can see it even now as people around the world who have been goaded to going out into the streets and demanding change, because it is change they will get. This has been A View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio. Coast to Coast next. I'm Space, and I'm out.